Welcome back to another episode of Suiting Up Varsity, a podcast dedicated to the sound of the band, the smell of popcorn, the feel of an old letter jacket, the sight of teenagers hoisting trophies high above their heads, and most of all to the grand history and fantastic stories of Nebraska prep sports. Join us as we look back in time at the great moments from a century plus of Nebraska high school athletics. I wanted to take the opportunity today to talk about some schools that don't always fit in well with our county school series or other things we kind of do on Suiting Up Varsity. So I wanted to take a look at, I was looking at one small school in Douglas County, but I found that their history is really tied up with others. Now, tangled high school stories are not unusual in the study of prep athletic history as schools merge and blend. But this one stands out as unique. It involves 4 schools in North Omaha over a span of over 100 years of education in that neighborhood. The succession of related high schools in North Omaha began at 21st and Binney in 1908 with the opening of Sacred Heart High School. Run by the Dominican sisters and always a smaller school, the Red Raiders did not regularly participate in high school athletics, at least on the state stage. They eventually were taken over by the local parish, but they never played in the all-comer state basketball tournaments of the teens and 20s, and they only finally entered basketball districts from 1940 to 1942, where we find they had a little bit of a sports surge. After a short break then, though, probably caused by World War II, they returned to the basketball postseason in 1948 and played primarily in Class C in the tournaments until 1968. But in all those years, the Red Raiders did not win a single district title and never even played in a district championship game. That's pretty unique. Now, Sacred Heart basketball produced a big scorer in 1963 in Dick Osterhaus, who scored 40 points in a ball game with Nebraska Def and led the Raiders in scoring throughout the year. Even that season, though, Sacred Heart's year ended in a first-round district loss to Bennington. Perhaps to find the most successful team in Sacred Heart history, we have to look at the school's short history as a football school. For the most part, in the 50s and 60s, I don't think they played football at all. But they did back in that first stretch where they were playing basketball districts in the early 40s. Coach Maury Pratt and his Raiders were undefeated in 1941, and I think that's the school's golden year, if you will. They grabbed the headlines in the season opener when they played blooming national power Boys Town to a scoreless tie. Now, at that point in their history, the West Dodge boys had never lost to a Nebraska school, so the tie was a big story. Backfield star and captain Pat Mulvihill keyed most of the Red Raiders scoring throughout the year, and his name was in a lot of the stories. But when the Little Five Conference All-Star team was selected, now the Little Five was a short-lived conference. In fact, the next year would be the Little Four, that involved Sacred Heart and the other diocese schools, St. Joseph and Holy Name, plus Boys Town, who was kind of trying to decide if they were going to have a Nebraska conference presence, and Nebraska School for the Deaf, which, of course, 10 years before, had won a state basketball title. It was Deaf who also tied the Red Raiders that year. They would finish 5-0-1, but again, when the all-conference team was selected, it was 220-pound end Gail Holtman, who was named the Player of the Year. In fact, the World Herald's Greg McBride opined that Holtman would compare very well with the best bigger school players in Omaha that year. McBride's word is enough for me to call Holtman the greatest Red Raider athlete in Sacred Heart history. When Sacred Heart closed, it was because of problems with its physical building. And Omaha Dominican High School would be opened up nearby to replace it. And would be open from 68 to 1983. Now, the Dominican Friars represent a transition in this school history. Though they were a parochial school run by the Omaha Diocese to replace Sacred Heart in North Omaha, their mission would shift through the years. The diocese mainly funded Dominican, but it was a tenuous relationship. Many Omaha Catholics had moved west, and from the beginning, the Dominican student body was about 70% non-Catholic. The school even had a class in Baptist thought. Just practically, the North Omaha parishes did not have enough people left in the pews to support the school. Dominican immediately embraced another role, an alternative school role, in order to draw enough students, unofficially meeting a need that the Omaha Public Schools were having. When Reverend James Gilg became principal in 1970, just a couple of years into the school's history, he carried this a step further, creating the Christian Urban Education Service, which led to a partnership with Boys Town. Slowly, the school became more of an alternative program and less of a diocese school. When the North Freeway Project announced that it would run its new expressway right through the Dominican High building, the diocese, Gilg, and Boys Town saw a chance to make this transition official. Boys Town took over ownership of the school in 1980 and started planning to move to a new modern campus in 1983. Throughout their history, the Friars of Dominican struggled athletically. For example, they started NSAA volleyball at the same time the rest of the state did in 1972, but they did not win a match until 1975. The best Friar basketball team might have been the very first in 68-69 when they returned several Sacred Heart starters from a year before and were coached by one of those great Sacred Heart athletes we talked about, Dick Osterhaus. Alas, a promising season was upended by 4 wins that had to be forfeited because Coach Osterhaus had played an ineligible transfer who turned out to not only be too old, but also in his 5th year of high school. Dominican did not start football until the early 70s, but their one All-State honoree comes from the gridiron. Darren Cargill was an 8-man All-State running back in 1981. He would be my choice for the greatest Dominican Friar athlete of all time. Now, Sacred Heart had worn red and white, and Dominican had adopted the red and added black, and those colors would make their way to the new school when Dominican closed its building in May of 1983 to make way for the freeway. The new campus would have a new name. Omaha Father Flanagan Chargers began play in the fall of '83. Though they kept Dominican's red and black colors, the new school, named after the Boys Town founder, had more athletic success, qualifying for the Boys State basketball tournament in its very first year, 1984, and then again in 1988. In 1997, the Chargers advanced to the C1 state semifinals before losing to eventual champ David City Aquinas. They had several basketball stars through the year. In that first year, Nipsey Jones was a consensus All-State basketball selection for the Chargers. And in 1989, James Haddon was All-State as he averaged nearly 30 a game. And in the school's last All-Stater was on that 1997 team, Calvin Strong. The Chargers finished in the boys track top 10 6 times, split evenly between Class C in 86, 88, and 89, and Class B in 90, 91, and 92. They claimed state track titles in 91 and 92, and they actually left Omaha Burke with the championship trophy in Class C in 1989. But the Chargers ended up having to forfeit points because of running an ineligible runner that moved Battle Creek ahead of them and gave Flanagan the runner-up trophy. George Beckwith, 1991, was the Charger star, probably the biggest Charger track star, claiming 3 straight 100-meter titles and doubling in the 200 in 1990. Now, the Chargers also produced a multitude of state wrestling medalists. Flanagan's best team finishes were 5th in Class C in 1987 and 10th in Class B in 1993. Their top individual was 2-time state champ Ron Hurt, who won Class B titles in 1992 and 93. Now, Flanagan closed in 1997 after state and federal law changes compelled individual school districts, like OPS, to create their own internal alternative programs for expelled youth. Jones, Hatton, Beckworth, Hurt, and Strong are just too difficult to separate for Flanagan GOAT honors. So we'll split the title of greatest Charger athlete 5 ways among them. When it closed, the still relatively new Omaha Flanagan campus, not yet 15 years old, at 26th and Hamilton, was sold to the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Now, the Boys and Girls Clubs turned over part of the facility to the Omaha Public Schools, where they would operate their own alternative school, which they call Omaha Blackburn High School. The Blackburn Pride has a nickname and colors. They're purple and white, but they have never competed in interscholastic athletics or been a member of the NSAA. They've got a beautiful turf football field and a track complex that has generic OPS signage and is used to host junior varsity and varsity contests, but we'll have to wait and see if they ever compete statewide. Well, that's it until next time for Suiting Up Varsity. In the meantime, check out our newly redesigned website where we kind of point you to all the things we have going in the Suiting Up Varsity project. Of course, there are links to these podcasts, but there are also links to our history presences where we present some of our writing and our work. For example, our YouTube channel, where we have some episodes that aren't up in the regular podcast feed, as well as some of the regular podcasts, and also our Patreon and our Substack, which are places you can read our first draft of Nebraska high school sports history. There are some articles available for free, and you can also become a member for a very small fee every month, as low as $1 on the Patreon, and read some of the things we're writing about Nebraska high school sports histories. Interesting stories and school histories, sharing all kinds of things on there. There's also links to our social media feeds where we put things out on Twitter and Blue Sky and Facebook almost daily. Also, there are links to our Suiting Up Varsity stores where we have some fun closed school t-shirts available, or posters celebrating great athletes and great champions in Nebraska history, or maybe you just want a Suiting Up Varsity hat. It's all there. And then there are links to our special projects we've done through the years, some of the crowdsourcing things we've done through our Twitter feed, like who are the greatest athletes ever from each Nebraska school, what Nebraska gyms and fields are named in honor of people, what are each school's school songs. We've got all kinds of things on there. So again, check out our website at suitingupvarsity.org to see all of those things. Until next time, thanks for listening and thanks for your support. We hope to hear from you soon. If you like this podcast, take time to rate us on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts. It helps others find our show. Or share one of our episodes on Twitter or Facebook or other social media. Help other Nebraska sports fans find us. This has been Suiting Up Varsity, I believe episode 49 maybe. I don't know, I've kind of lost track. Written and produced by me, Greg Mays. Technical and research assistance by my brothers Tate and Trent Mays. Helpful audio advice and encouragement from Chris Shookai. And as always, dedicated to Jerry Mathers, the godfather of Nebraska high school sports history and the inspiration for this podcast. Suiting Up Varsity is the anchor show of the Nebraska Varsity Network. Copyright 2025.